Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Join me as I seek out the small incremental changes being applied in other industries that we can learn from and that can be applied in healthcare. Can these changes bring immediate value, but also add up to the big improvements and revolution we need in healthcare? Come along with me to explore the possibilities. My innovative guests from around the globe have used small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Dave Lareau. He's an old friend, old colleague, and the CEO of Medicomp. Dave, thanks for joining me today.
Well, Nick, it's great to see you. We used to always sit across from each other on the flight home from HIMSS, so it's different to see you in a little different venue these days.
Yeah, absolutely. We're glad not to be on a plane. I think we both agree on that, so always a good thing. So for those that are listening in, it would help just to understand a little bit of your background and how you ended up as the CEO of Medicomp. I know this has been a long journey for you with lots of experience, and we've certainly intersected over the years for a variety of reasons. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to this place.
Okay, in the late 80s, I put in a workflow system at Sinai Hospital in Baltimore. It was an early precursor of the thing that eventually became Lotus Notes. And through that, I met some physicians who were having trouble with their billing. As a person who, with an accounting background and financial background, they asked me to help them. So I formed a billing company. I didn't know anything about medical billing, so I hired the smartest woman I could find to run the business. She built it up. It was very successful. It got to the point where I really had nothing to do except get in the way. So one of my customers was the private practice of some of the leaders of the Johns Hopkins internal medicine department. They expressed interest in 1990 in electronic medical records. I don't even know if they called it that back then, and asked me to try to identify one for them. I didn't know anything about that, so I wasted a lot of their time over about a 6-month period, and they finally said to me, Dave, you're a really nice guy, we love you, but you're wasting our time. None of these systems think the way a doctor thinks. They are slowing us down, they get in our way. I had brought in vendors to my office on Wednesday nights, once a month, to show their system to my clients, and they basically said, none of these are going to work. We process information very quickly. We're trained to do that, right, and these systems don't. Please, I said, so what do I need to do? They said, you need to think like a doctor thinks. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. They said, here's about 6 or 7 books to read. Read these. At some point, you're either going to give up or say, I think I got it. I was in the Principles of Internal Medicine about halfway through it, in the cardiology section, and all of a sudden I realized that what they were telling me was the more information they have, the more specific their diagnostic workup in their head. Unlike most templated systems and systems of that time that relied on additive fixed lists, you tell them fever, they don't really know much. You tell them headache and stiff neck, and they start thinking about meningitis. So they go down this path. That's not the way the systems work. So they said, when you find one like that, when you find one that has that kind of computational efficiency at its basis, bring those people to me. So I had some salespeople. They met somebody here from Medicomp in 1992, and they called me and said, you need to see what this guy, Peter Goltra, who's the founder and chairman of Medicomp still and the president, you need to see what he's doing because he's working with physicians to build a clinical data engine that says, if you're thinking about this diagnosis, what are you thinking about? What are the signs, symptoms, physical exam, test, diagnosis, and therapies you're thinking about, and how to present them? Because the physicians are the most highly trained knowledge workers in the world, just about. Why are we dumbing them down with systems that get in their way? They know what they're doing. Just get out of their way and let them do it. I came down here I was in Baltimore at the time, living in Baltimore, and had a really successful billing company. But as I told you before, I really wasn't doing anything. I wasn't adding value. A woman named Louise Gay was running it, and she was doing a great job. So I got involved with this search, found Peter Goltra, brought his product. At the time, it was called MedTrack. Showed it to the folks at Hopkins, and they said, this is it. This engine has the basis of the way we think and work. The user interface, which wasn't even a term then, okay? The screens, are terrible.
Right.
We need to clean those up. You've got a lot of work to do, but the core of this system, which Peter had been building since 1978, the core was the way that the clinical data was linked and organized. So Peter said, I can't really hire you. I'm not really interested in having somebody like you on board, but maybe we can do another business relationship. So the billing company I was using was then Medical Manager, which at that point was dominant in the ambulatory space. So we wrote an interface between Medical Manager and what the product that had our engine in it at that point was MedTrack. We put it out there. We installed it in about 50 sites. It was quite successful, but it was sort of purpose-specific interface to Medical Manager. So I had the conversation with Peter sometime in 1994, 95. I said, if you really want to get serious about this, we need to think about not having this purpose-built to interface with a specific system, but build as middleware that we can license to almost anybody. And the core part is the clinical engine, because eventually people will need to get data in and out of these systems. And as far as I saw at the time, Peter had the only workable way to do that. So I finally convinced him to let me come on board. I came on board in 1995, tried to work from Baltimore, but then in 97, 98, decided to move down here and really focus on the engine, not the UI, not the back-end data store, make the engine a consumable piece of middleware for anybody who needed this kind of capability. And that's how I came to be at Medicomp. And then I started as a director of marketing, then became COO, and then became CEO about 10 or 12 years ago.
So I think what's really fascinating as I listen to that story, and I've known you a long time, I didn't know all of those details, is that, you started entirely differently from, all of the traditional EMR companies who all came at this, for the most part, from a billing angle. I think Cerner came more from a laboratory standpoint, but they were not attacking this as a clinical problem, whereas your sort of focus has always been on the clinical aspect to this. And, what really stood out to me, aside from the fact that you're involved with Lotus Notes, and I didn't think I'd ever hear about that again, because that was the bane of my life, at least in one company I worked in, was this concept around the principles of internal medicine, where, as you rightly described, the more information we have as physicians, the finer our sort of processing goes to get to that differential diagnosis list. And it sounds very much like that's sort of a core principle within Medicomp.
That's very much the core principle. We are organized. We have about 360,000 clinical concepts that are organized through diagnoses. Now, over the years, other requirements have been built into the system: quality measures, documentation requirements for HCC, E&M, et cetera. So we have migrated from sort of a pure clinical focus to the things that attach to the clinical encounter and care that also need to be done. But at our core, we have a data engine that has we've never really done the number, tens of millions of computable links or nodes between exam, symptoms, therapies, treatments, diagnoses, comorbidities, et cetera. It's internally, it's sort of a network of nodes. Relational databases don't work well for these types of relationships, so it's a graph database that was purpose-built and designed over about 15 years to very quickly access and present the clinical concepts that are relevant for almost any condition. And as you just said, the more information you have, the more focused your thinking gets, until you hit something and you go, oh, by the way, wait a minute, now I'm starting a second thread. So the engine allows users to do that in real time and quickly see the relevant items in either a very short list, which is the hallmark findings of something, or a longer one if they're exploring and they're not sure yet. But it all works around those purpose-built algorithms to support the diagnostic thought process, which is why relational databases don't work. They're not fast enough to support the variety of relationships that exist in your mind when you're treating a patient or in a processor that's trying to stay with you in real time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you and I have been in this space for a long time, and we've seen all this, the emergence of the electronic medical record, which I was involved in one of the very early implementations of this paperless hospital around the same time as you were developing this. And much has happened. We've sort of implemented all this with gargantuan amounts of cash from the government to say put in these systems with no real thought about getting information out and the sharing and so forth. And obviously with a focus, it's entirely different. So fast forward, if you can, to the point now. So we're in this electronic health record world. What happens next? What comes after this EHR? We've got it. I don't know that we're getting the value out of it. At least I certainly don't hear it from the industry and from the users. What are we going to be doing?
Somehow we have to. This when I say this out loud, I feel sort of stupid. We have to make sure that the computers that we had everybody buy and put these systems on actually have computable data.
Right.
We have to make certain, and narrative is not computable data. LOINC codes, SNOMED codes, RX norm codes, DSM codes, CPT codes, all of which have different models and different designs. They're not really computable without a massive amount of overhead to turn them into something computable. So what we've been working on is, each one of our concepts is numeric and uses this purpose-built specific data structures for quick access. So the next thing that we need to do and that we're working on with Intelligent is we need to be able to turn the 80% of the volume of these systems that are represented by text into data. We need to turn it into data, not necessarily into 6 or 7 different terminologies, all with a separate data model that would be massively computationally inefficient, but into real data that works, supports the way docs work and think. So you're going to see a lot of microphones hanging from ceilings, et cetera, at HIMSS, where people are talking about ambient and conversational AI, and that's going to let the machines learn and magically turn things into things that think or work like doctors. But my question is, who's going to be programming those things that use those algorithms if the vendors have had 20 years to do this and they haven't figured it out yet? How's that going to work? It's going to be magic. It's going to be I wiggle my nose, I wave my magic wand, and boom, we have data. I don't think it's going to be that easy. In fact, I think it's going to take 2 to 3 years to have anything that even looks like that. We'll be showing some stuff at our booth at HIMSS, working with Intelligent, because we finally, after years, convinced somebody to aim their NLP output at our clinical data engine. I think we'll be able to do some pretty special things with us, but that will grow exponentially over time, I think. And we're right at the very beginning of that process in the industry.
So for those of you just joining, I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and today I'm talking to Dave Lareau, the CEO of Medicomp. We were just talking about this transition to this post-EHR world, and ultimately driving down to what is essentially semantic interoperability and data interoperability as part of it. And you were just talking about what you're going to be showing at HIMSS, which is just around the corner. Tell us a little bit about that and what people can expect to see.
A couple things they can expect to see. Our partner Intelligent has a space in our booth, and we'll be showing there. And it's a very simple but really powerful demonstration. We'll be showing how you can take a very complex note that a patient with maybe 5 or 6 conditions, some comorbid, some acute, et cetera, have the text on the screen, send that text to the intelligent NLP engine. The intelligent NLP engine will turn that into medicine data. We will then identify relevancy links in that data so that you can click on any diagnosis in that note and highlight the relevant things for it, for that specific diagnosis, so that you can get a clinically intelligently filtered view of a note where it says, okay, I've got somebody with diabetes, I've got somebody with renal failure. I click on diabetes, I want to see, the worsening of vision, any retinal hemorrhages, are they on metformin, et cetera? Are they having any thirst? Have they been referred to an endocrinologist? What's their A1C, et cetera? Whereas if I click on renal failure, it'll highlight the creatinine, the bun, any urinary problems, et cetera, that kind of stuff. So they will send us medicine concepts. We will run them through our relevancy engine, send the relevancy engine links back in the background so the user can now click on any diagnosis in that note and see the items highlighted. That will enable the docs to quickly find what they want without reading the whole thing, what we call eyeball time, okay? That will also allow, and the second part of this, that will allow reviewers of the note, nurse reviewers, et cetera, that are reviewing for Medicare Advantage, hierarchical condition code documentation requirements and risk adjustment, allow them to very easily see what's in that note that's relevant for the diagnoses they care about, and we'll also probably be showing, I won't promise this, we'll probably be showing a scoring algorithm that runs in the background that's configurable by the reviewing organization, which could be at a payer, could be at a large clinic, and say, for Medicare Advantage purposes, for documentation, sufficiency and audit, this note definitely passes, this note definitely fails, this one probably requires review. Click on the relevant diagnosis. There's over 10,000 ICD-10 CM codes that qualify for HCC risk adjustment. We will have those ready so that you can click on any one and see what applies to it. So we think we'll be able to show how we can support physicians in intelligently filtering things and support reviewers and coders in seeing what they need to pay attention to and what they don't. Those things are also wired into the clinical quality measures, and they're wired into the risk adjustment calculation because they're all based on data points that are correlated in this engine.
So as you describe all of that, it sounds like precisely the solution that I'm always talking about when I make the comment, it's never a data problem, it's always a filter problem. And what you're describing is the filter mechanism to present the data in a form that is consumable by the individual who has a set of lenses that are specific to, his role, his background, his specialty, and, the patient. Is that a fair sort of summary of what you're talking about?
Yeah, we call one view of that clinical lens. And we actually have two patents, one on intelligent filtering of medical information and one that sounds similar, but it's a little different, intelligent filtering of health-related data, in which we're using those relationships in our engine. The exciting thing and what's a little bit different about what we're doing this year at HIMSS is we can actually apply those filters to text because of our work with intelligent. Because as a clinician, you've already done the filtering in your head. 95 to 99% of the time, you know what you know what you need to see, you know what it is, you even know what you're going to do when you see it, if it's normal or abnormal. You already know that. You spent years being sleep deprived learning this stuff, right? Medical school, internship, residency, private practice, you know it. It's really clinical pattern recognition, and that's a core sort of landmark that we use when we're designing something, saying, are we giving the clinicians, and we work with clinicians on this, that's the bulk of our work, are we giving them what they need to do what they already know how to do?
So is this what you would describe as clinical AI?
Yeah, that's exactly what we call it, because it's not machine learning, although it probably will enable machine learning because of the data structures involved, but it's clinical AI because we sat down with clinicians and said, if you wanted a system to accompany you on your thought process and support it, what would it look like? So over the years, we've built these, what we call diagnosis descriptions, with all of the nodes and links in it to support that.
Right. So we've got a little bit of time left to sort of cover a couple of other things. And I know, certainly an area of focus and interest is the nurse's voice in all of this and providing supporting infrastructure. What's going on in that area for Medicomp?
We started a project about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe a little more now, to support nursing care plans and documentation. At that point, of course, the United States was in the middle of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, $35 billion feeding frenzy. Thank you. And so we went offshore to do it. We actually implemented it at Bumrungrad Hospital in Bangkok, which was the first Joint Commission accredited hospital in Asia. We're now taking it back to the U.S. market. We also have a nursing documentation and care plan engine. We'll be actually introducing that for the U.S. market at HIMSS.
Wow.
It intersects with the things from, it uses the same data structures and same links and same engine. It just offers different views of the information, purpose-built for the user, purpose-built for a nurse, a physical therapist, etc., or a physician to see the parts of those notes that they want to see, because it's using the same data points. So we'll be showing that also.
Fantastic. So anything else at HIMSS? And for those people that are going, where can they find you? What specific things have you got going on at HIMSS coming up?
We're at booth 3559, which is right on the main aisle. We've got Intelligent, the NLP folks, showing how their stuff works with ours in our booth. We also have Holy Name Medical Center, which is doing our full software development kit with the user interface code and all that is called QUIP. They're building a QUIP-centric hospital information system, and they'll be showing that. We also have, if anybody gets the HIMSS Daily News, we have, I believe, the inside, front cover, and facing page, where we're having a contest where we have a word puzzle, and at the bottom we say, identify the concepts for diabetes. If anybody just circles 1 or 2, brings them to our booth, and they play our clinical lens game, which allows them to intelligently filter things themselves. If they'll spin a wheel and win cash, they can win up to $50. And if they filled out that puzzle, which sort of represents how difficult it is to find data in any EHR, they can double their winnings. So they went up to $100. We also have a reception with food, beer, wine, 4 to 6 p.m. Both Tuesday and Wednesday night at HIMSS. The folks from Intelligent will be doing a little presentation and be available for Q&A on Tuesday, and the folks from Holy Name on Wednesday. And it's just, we aim to go there and just get our message out and really have a good time, and hope people enjoy coming by and seeing us.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, I certainly remember one of the last HISS Talk events that Medicomp was a sponsor of in the days when he was still running them, and it was always a fantastic event, and always pleased to participate. So I'm excited. I think there's lots going on. I'm truly excited by this sort of focus on the clinical intelligence and the ability to drive to utility of information for the clinicians, which has been lacking in this space. It's all about the codes and the billing, and and here we've got a real solution that sort of focuses on the clinician, and ultimately because you focused on that as a result of the interactions that you had at Johns Hopkins, which I think drives what was the demand. It's the demand from the clicians to get information that they can really use. So I think exciting times. Looking forward to seeing you at HIMSS and everybody else. So just remains for me to thank you for joining me and sharing some of the details, Dave.
Well, Nick, thank you. It was great to talk to you again. I hope to see you in Orlando.
Thanks for joining me today. Do you have any better ideas, or have you found a small incremental change that's brought about a big improvement in your world? Let's continue the conversation on our hashtag, the Incrementalist, or share with me at DrNick1 on Twitter. You can find more information about the show on our program page at healthcarenowradio.com. And tune in next time to hear my discussions with leaders and innovators from around the globe who've revolutionized their space by using small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and I'm starting a revolution through evolution.